Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bonnie Vandermeulen, Training Coordinator for Wisconsin Facets. On behalf of our entire Wisconsin Facets staff, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Our webinar today is entitled ADHD Revisited. Our presenter today is Numsa Gwala Ogisi, who is a PhD graduate of Southern Illinois University, is a teacher educator, and professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. She has taught in higher education and public schools in general and special education in several countries over the past 35 years. Numsa has and consults with schools and educational organizations and agencies internationally, nationally, regionally, and locally. She has published many articles in referred journals, and published book chapters, served as a keynote speaker at international conferences, and for some regional institutions' graduations. Numsa has presented over 150 conferences internationally, nationally, and throughout the region. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you Numsa Gwala Ogisi. Numsa?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Oh, no, it's not longer morning, it's afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome. I will be, going through, I have a lot of content and I just want to alert you, I am not going to go through each slide individually. I'll run through them, but I'd like to, just to talk more about the examples and share with you and then give time in between for questions. And I understand I'm talking to parents as well as educators. I am a parent as well, and I have a child with a son with ADHD, and so I, speak some of it from personal experiences. So just to get started, okay. Some of you probably have an understanding of what ADHD is, given what you know and what you have learned. I put a couple of things, a description of why this topic matters to, to me, and I'm hoping that you will think about why this topic, is worth your time. Many of you who are parents already know why, because one of your most precious, human beings has this disorder. And this challenge, it's not a disorder, it's a way of being in the world that's different from other people. It is a very common, challenge for, kids, especially. Today I'm going to talk more about school age learners. About 8% of them, experience this, and some claim the numbers are much higher. And for those of you who are parents, some of your kids are served under the IEPs, and some of them are under 504 plans. Either way, that is one way of service delivery, and you can advocate for that. Most of the professionals who evaluate children with ADHD use the school psychologist or psychiatrist normally use the DSM, the Psychiatric Association criteria, which only identifies 3 subtypes of ADHD. Today, I'd like you to consider a different way of looking at ADHD, because if we go with just the 3, there are a lot of kids that get lost in the middle, and some of our professionals don't adequately address the learner's needs because they are looking at it through the lens of just those 3 subtypes. The neuropsych, professionals that I reference and like to look at are those that identify 7 subtypes of ADHD. And when you see your child, and sometimes when you see yourself, I'm one of those, you can look at, whoa, which one am I? So the first one being the classic, kids who are inattentive, distractible, and so forth. So I'm not going to spend time reading through all of them, but I just want to make you aware there are 7 different subtypes. And what's the significance of that? How we approach, supporting the kids will make a difference if we look at these different subtypes, because then we would be more accurate in deciphering what is going on with the child, instead of guessing within the three ranges, and we try something and it's not working. And that's been true for medical professionals as well. And some of the neuropsych professionals claim that some of the kids don't do well with some of the medication that are prescribed for them, because they are based on those three subtypes, and the kids are really in between those or something totally different. For example, if they have subtype number 5, which is really controlled more by the limbic system rather than just the prefrontal cortex, then those medications are not going to be as effective for that child. And in fact, they may just do the opposite and kind of escalate some of the problems. So that's one of the reasons I'd like to challenge you to take a look at these different subtypes of ADHD. Many of you have probably heard already that the field is now referring to ADHD as the executive function, which, based on the three subtypes, fits very perfectly. Executive function is controlled by the prefrontal cortex. And so the reason why that matters is it kind of gives us a clue in terms of what we can look at and how we can approach, supporting and intervening with the child. Because humans' brains, are not fully developed at birth, children are not born with these skills. They develop them as they grow. They have the potential to develop them, but what happens with a child with ADHD, they do not develop the executive functions to the same degree and to the same level as their peers, and therefore end up struggling with the functions that are associated with that. If you look at slide number 9, you can see the different functions that are controlled and regulated by the PFC. So, and a lot of those cognitive and social behaviors include a lot of what we expect kids to be able to do when we're at home as well as at school. We expect kids to be able to control their impulses, to be able to listen attentively without, fidgeting or getting lost. We expect them to be able to pay attention and focus on a speaker or on a task. And to respond appropriately to different situations. Even when those situations are stressful, they're able to read them and respond to them appropriately. So what happens with learners with ADHD is those particular skill sets are not fully developed. And as a result, they don't develop the working memory that they need to perform some of the tasks, to remember, the important information that you teach them as either as parents or in classrooms as teachers. And they struggle with expressing themselves in written or spoken language, not because they are incapable or they don't have the intellectual capacity. More actually, it's the contrary. They're smart kids, but formulating those responses and processing the stimulus and then responding appropriately is what they struggle with. And so that's part of the executive functioning process. So planning, organizing time, and I know I used to get very frustrated with my son, because organization was like, what do you mean? You mean pile number 1 or pile number 5? Kind of thing. So challenges in organizing, but it's not just organizing materials and space, it's also organizing time. This is a kid that's going to struggle with realizing that something starts at a particular time, and so that means I have to be there at that time. That doesn't mean, for example, if this webinar started at noon, a kid with ADHD or an adult with ADHD may not think about, okay, that means I should be logged on at noon. That doesn't mean I leave home to go to the office where I'm going to be, participating in this webinar. So, and for people that don't have that challenge, it's really very difficult to understand what's going on in that person's mind, processing time, processing space, and then starting and finishing projects. It's the same thing as well, but that one is a little different. My son used to say, well, I'm just like you, Mom, because you'll start a project in the kitchen and then realize, oh, I need something that's in the dining room. And then you go to the dining room, and when you're in the dining room, you see something that needs to get fixed. So you start working on that. You still haven't finished what you started in the kitchen, and then you go, so it's like you have a lot of projects that get started but don't get finished. And that is what happens a lot with the kids with ADHD at school. It's not that they don't do their homework. They do their homework, but some of it may not be finished. But because in the process of doing that, something else caught their attention that needed to get done, and they started working on that. Or they will finish their homework, put it in a drawer somewhere or in their backpack, but forget to submit it to you at school. The parent knows, and sometimes we would have trouble with families. I remember being called by teachers saying, my son hasn't submitted homework for the past 7 days. It's like, what are you talking about? I know this boy completed his work, and I looked at it. I know, and it's in his binder. So what are you talking about? But he completed it, but he didn't submit it. So that part of managing and organizing self, time, space, materials kind of balls and kind of tentacles into a lot of different activities that impact their performance and success at school. And sometimes when we're struggling with things, we have that inner voice that we can use that tells us and cues us, well, wait a minute, that assignment is still in your backpack. That internal self-talk, that helps us control our emotions. For a kid with ADHD, that's there, but they're not able to isolate that internal self-talk and act based on that. So they end up, it might be, later on they might, oh, that's what I was thinking about. Shoot, I didn't do such and such and such. So it doesn't work the same way that it does in your typically developing kid. And so their process of analyzing complex problems may be a little different, not fit what you know or what you expect, but that doesn't mean they're incapable. So that's some of the things that you're going to struggle with, and planning ahead for the future, like I said. And you can see how that could be impacted when they struggle with organization of time. So planning for assignments that are due 5 weeks from now, that is a huge stressor for a kid with ADHD, especially if as a teacher you don't have things due in increments throughout that period when you're working on that particular project. So those are just some of the challenges that you're going to be working with. So what does that mean? Well, here's my bottom line. This child can succeed in your classrooms, in the community, everywhere, if we understand that our job as school professionals is to equalize and help them be on the same footing with other kids and access instruction successfully. So equity becomes a really big deal, in schools. What the heck does that mean? That means you, as school professional, I'm talking to teachers now, as teachers, you need to understand what that child brings to class. And by the way, not all kids with ADHD are going to exhibit the same challenges. And that's why it is essential to get to know your students and see what it is that you need to do with them. What is it that they present with that's going to be inconsistent with what you expect in the classroom? So what I normally tell people is start looking at the mismatches. What do I bring? What do you want? And then what's the mismatch between those two? And then our job as school professionals is to then help that child, use a strategy to help them through that mismatch so that they can access, whatever you're teaching at the time. So to me, that's what equity is. So it is important to really get a good sense of who your students are. What do they bring with them? Is this a kid that's really impulsive, or a kid that really doesn't process emotions very well, which is still part of that if you buy into the 7 subtypes, because a kid that's impulsive and really doesn't process emotions very well, that's a kid with the limbics, subtype. So what am I going to do about that? So the more you understand, the better. But guess what? It's the same thing for the parents as well. I love slide number 12 because that shows you what, as a parent, what you may, be dealing with. Okay, there was this paint. I'm going to play with it and experiment and see in the moment, what does this feel like? And we get upset, but you know what? We should be excited. Whoa, this is interesting, but I know we're not going to be happy and pleased that the kid experimented with the paint and tried to figure out what they can do with that paint, but they did something. So how do you process that? Is this a scenario that requires punishment? No, this is a scenario that requires teaching. And in that moment, this is an extremely teachable, moment that you can seize as a parent. Okay, yep, paint goes on things, but you know what? Paint doesn't go on the floor. I'll show you later where paint goes, where we can paint the wall and things like that. So now this paint needs to be removed, and I will help you with that removal. So that's the kind of thing. And what I suggest, think about those characteristics and translate them into everyday practices that the kids need to engage in at home or at school. What do we expect? They can be restless. How does that restlessness, play out at school? What does it look like at school? And what does it interfere with? And if they're restless and we don't address that as teachers or as parents, then they become anxious. And once they're anxious, there is no functioning when we're anxious, because then our brains get hijacked by the amygdala, which is, the watchdog of our brains. And what it does is it protects us from pain. So when we're restless and we're anxious and we're not getting any relief from that, then that part of the brain takes over. And guess what? We're no longer going to be focusing on math or social studies or whatever you're teaching. And if you're at home, the kid's not going to be focusing on cleaning or washing dishes and whatever else you're doing with them. So that's another piece. So how does it look for this particular kid? Okay, so, and I know this it's easier said than done, but the more you know your kid, and I know parents know their kids, so you're in a better position to figure these things out. So as school professionals, you need to need to be talking to the parents, because guess what? Parents know their kids, and they can give you a clue in terms of what's working at home, and you can give them ideas as well about what's working at school. What do I find successful and working with students at school? I have, if you look at slide 15, I decided to put that up front because the major issue that prevents kids from learning in our classrooms is challenging behavior. Why? Because we expect behaviors from them that they cannot give us. They have not developed that, processing of that emotion and that behavior. They don't have the full emotional range to respond as well as we expect them to in our classes. And if we don't understand that, then we're going to escalate the problem instead of helping them settle and learn. So here's the deal. Teach the behaviors, the emotional responses that you expect. There are very few emotions that are hardwired in us. Only the ones in the middle of slide 16. Sadness, joy, disgust, anger, fear, surprise. Those are the only ones that are hardwired in all of us. The rest of them are learned. So if we have kids that we feel really aggressive with other kids, and don't care about, we think they don't care about hurting other kids and so forth, it may not be that at all. The kid may care, but they haven't developed empathy, because empathy is not hardwired. Empathy is learned from modeling, from experiences. So we have to teach that. And the same thing with gratitude, with compassion and kindness and so forth. So to me, those should be, elementary experiences as part of your social emotional learning, teaching those skills, demonstrating what those look like, and actually even helping kids, do something. Some schools have, days of kindness, acts of kindness day, where literally this classroom discusses how they can be kind to other students in class and outside of class. And that when you do that, you're actually practicing, you're teaching that kid for whom kindness is not anchored yet, what kindness looks like. And you can engage in different actions and behaviors that model, this is kindness. Kindness looks like this. Kindness is a little different from compassion. I can be kind and compassionate and empathic at the same time. So that kind of thing. All right, I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions.
There is one question, and it is, sometimes it's really hard if you are teaching a group of students to pay special attention to the child with attention deficit and not hold them as accountable as you do for others. How do you handle a situation like that?
Excellent. Here's what I would suggest and how I've handled it. And interestingly enough, I have adults here at the college level who also have ADHD, and therefore I need to still use some of those strategies. Proactive planning is the key. You already know that you have this kid in your classroom. And so what are the behaviors that they normally exhibit that interfere with their learning or your instruction? And you can plan for that upfront. For example, if I have a kid that I know is going to have difficulty, paying attention, and they may, which the problem is they're not even going to start with the, on the project that you, or the lesson that you're teaching. So here's what's really critical in that process. Before you even start teaching, have a procedure that you have taught all of your students that you use to get everybody's attention before you start teaching. For example, in one of my adult classes, I clap my hand and the student, I said, I clap once, twice, and the students have to clap as well. And I have this example in one of the slides. They have to clap back, which tells me, all right, I heard you, I'm ready. I'm clapping back to indicate that I am ready to listen to you. Okay, and then it is okay to also model what you're expecting. I need everybody to be quiet, and it's okay to wait, and even maybe even use a cue what it looks like to be quiet. And when you have a kid with ADHD, when you're giving those directions, I might actually even combine that with some proximity control strategies. Instead of giving those directions from the front, standing in the front only, I might walk towards where that student is so that I can cue personally, privately, while I'm giving directions to the whole class. So everybody, I need you to get your reading book and open to page 21. I may work with this kid in advance and say, hey, today I'd like you to be my teaching assistant. You're going to be the one that's going to, demonstrate getting this assignment, this work started. So when I say it's time for reading, I will call on you to tell the students what we're going to be doing. We're going to be reading from this particular book. We are on page so and so. Have this kid be the one that demonstrates that. You've cued them in advance. And guess what? That's a sneaky way of teaching the behavior that you're going to be expecting from them when you're working with the whole class. So that's one way, and there are many other ways you can do, you can start figuring out, okay, what do I know about this kid? What might I do? And so it's a different way of differentiating, but upfront instead of just after you start, the lesson and the kid starts, acting out. Okay. Here's something else that's important to keep in mind. One of the characteristics of kids with ADHD is they don't know how to self-activate. That's part of the PFC problem. So you're gonna literally need to get them going, and that's why I do the hand clapping, because that's a cue to their brains. Whenever she claps her hands, she means all of our eyes, all of our attention need to be on her. Okay, and then wait until everybody is with you, and then begin. Because if you begin before that kid has, focused, then you're going to lose them. And then they're going to continue doing whatever they were doing that's, not part of your lesson. Okay?
Thank you.
A lot of kids. All right. Any other question?
Not at this time.
Okay. A lot of kids with ADHD, are very impulsive. And that's very difficult for teachers to deal with, but it's also difficult for parents to deal with at home. Okay. Because this is a kid that's not going to focus on what you're telling them. Let me give you an example. I'll give you a parent example and a teacher example. For, I'm going to use my son again. My direction is, hey, we leave for school at 7:30, which means you need to be, washed, dressed, you've had breakfast, and it is time to go. His impulse is going to be, oh, I'm going to go run outside and get a little fresh air before we go to school. Well, is that going to work? No, So what do I do as a parent? I can't leave what I'm doing to keep running after him, outside. So I'm going to start what I started with them, or he's going to continue, doing whatever he was doing and not pay attention to what I'm expecting him to do. Focusing on the here and now is what impulsivity is about. So how am I going to do that as a parent? So I'm going to call him, all right, you're getting up. We're at the kitchen right now. We start eating. And this is why I don't know how many of you are familiar with Discipline with Love and Logic. It is a powerful, approach to working with kids, period, and particularly, with kids with challenging behaviors and so forth. And this fits that pattern. So what you do, you describe what you're going to do first. This is not going to work if you struggle being patient as a teacher or even as a parent. So you describe, we're going to be eating breakfast, and breakfast will be over at 7:30, which means what? If you chose not to eat breakfast at 7:30, you're going to go to school hungry. If you have a teacher that also uses and understands Discipline with Love and Logic, that would be a powerful pair. You and the parent would be a powerful team to help the kid, not only just with impulsivity, attention, and following directions, but with a host of other things. So, and what I would say to my son is, my mom's car leaves at 7:30 with you. There's no option that you're going to school, but how you go to school is your choice. Are you going to go to school washed and clean, or are you going to go to school in your pajamas? And then I do a reminder, 7:35, 25, mom's car leaves in 5 minutes with you in it. At that time, I already realized this boy is not going to be ready. So guess what? I call the teacher. We're on our way to school in pajamas. And if this is a Love and Logic teacher, that teacher already knows what to do and what to expect. In the meantime, I've put all of his little, school clothes, put them in the bag and put them in the car. And then when 7:30 comes, get in the car. I am going to go. Get in the car. And if he, starts crying, that's okay. It's not going to kill him. If I have to pick him up or escort him to the car, I will do that. But we are going to school. He made a choice to go to school in pajamas. That doesn't mean you take away consequences. Is that going to be a shameful consequence? No, not if you have a Love and Logic teacher whose students already understand. So when we come to school, the teacher will meet us at the door. And one of the practices of Love and Logic is you deal with kids with empathy. So the teacher's going to meet us at the door and empathize with my son. Oh, I'm so sorry. You must not have been able to get ready on time. Well, you know what? Don't worry about it. We're having circle right now. When we finish circle, you can go and change into your school clothes. So the kid gets the example, gets what they did that was not okay, while at the same time, you didn't punish. The kid may see going to school as punishment, but was it punishment by you? No. And that's why we have to use a lingo that works with that. You made a choice. So are you going to make a different choice next time? And guess what? I never had to do that twice. It only happened once. And we were on board. But you need to have both the parent that's practicing using Discipline with Love and Logic and a teacher that's using Discipline with Love and Logic. It's very powerful, and it works it works well. And then you can also have charts, and I did have charts, for my son, not only paper charts on the refrigerator, but I found today you have the kinds of technology, so you can have a schedule on an iPad if he has an iPad, so which will remind him not only, by seeing what he's supposed to be doing, but it will also tell him so he can listen to what's next and so forth. And for teachers at school, you can do video modeling for the activities that you expect from them. So you can use, the peers that know how to do things and model, engaging in the behaviors that you expect, especially for younger kids. And so that would be very helpful. And it really helps. And teach active listening. What does that look like? And then, I know we don't think about that, but guess what? This kid needs to learn what that looks like. What does attending look like? Your eyes are on the teacher, your mouth is closed, your hands are doing whatever you want them to be doing. So your modeling, peer modeling, can be very helpful. And at home, if you have, siblings that can model and partner up with that kid to engage in the behaviors that you expect, that would be very helpful. But you have to have that conversation with the family so that, the siblings know how to support rather than to ridicule and poke fun at not following directions or attending or engaging in expected behaviors at home, because that's, usually what happens. So figure out what your kid responds to at home, and then as a teacher, you can see what kind of drives the students and the student and so forth. And it also helps to give directions, in from different modalities. My son did better with something visual. So if he could see something, he could do it. And he loved art. So whenever I would use models like, he loved the bear, it's when he was in elementary, he loved Berenstain Bears. So anything that had a bear in it, he could focus on. So that becomes your canvas to get and grab his attention while you get them ready. So, say it, do it, show it, and see what happens. And for example, if you're a teacher and you want the kid to raise their hand before they speak, your kid that's impulsive is going to just speak without raising their hand. So you demonstrate what that looks like. Raise your hand and wait to be called on. Now and then I used to see some of my students who will raise their hands and start speaking immediately. No, raise your hand and wait to be called on, before you speak. And if you're not going to point at that kid and they have their hand raised, acknowledge them at least. Oh, gee, Bonnie, I see you have your hand up. Thank you. I'll get to you in just a moment. I'll start with so and so. So, you can put your hand down, you will be next. So the kid can relax and realize, okay, she's paying attention to me. I'll be able to get to say what I need to say or what I was thinking about. So you're really empowering the kid's voice by acknowledging that they followed directions without really describing that you followed directions, but just acknowledging them and then teaching them to wait their turn. So I'm going to start with so and so, and then I'll be right with you. And most kids tend to respond to that. And how you present information also makes a big difference. Especially for teachers at home, we don't have a lot of time and latitude to present things to our kids in ways that are as exciting as you can at school. So home is different, school is very different as well, but some of it can, work together. And if you have kids that really struggle and inattentive and and impulsive, then you could guess what? There are other kids who are not as focused as well. So how you start your lesson may be very, different. One of the things that I learned to do, I started my lessons with a movement activity, which is sort of like a focusing activity, and there are tons of those. The links that I gave you in the PowerPoint have a lot of those activities that you can start class with, that can grab students' attention and get them ready to focus on your instruction. Yoga for kids is huge these days. So there are tons of activities. There are exercises, and they're like 5 minutes or even less. If you want to wake the kids up, then you engage in the activities that gets the kids, brains fired up and moving and ready to work. While if you want to calm them down after, let's say you've just, they're just coming back from recess and they're all over the place and not ready to start, whatever session you're teaching, then engage in that calming activity. And there's also music that you can get that goes along with that. For those of you that use Cohen Press, they have a CD with different kinds of music. There's, energizing music, focusing music, calming music. So you can play that in the background while the kids are, filing in from recess, because then you want them calm, from recess, and then you can, start your instruction, and that would be very helpful to them. And that helps with focusing, that helps with attention. Slide 19 shares that strategy that I talked to you about, getting students' attention and clapping and so forth. And for adults, for secondary level students, the activity on slide 19, I use with students here in college, that would work in middle school or high school as well. So, and that's one of the things. Okay, I'm going to pause for questions.
We don't have any questions at this time, Namsa.
Okay, excellent. All right, kids that struggle with procrastination, poor internal supervision. What's going on with that kid? This is a kid that they know what needs to get done, but they can't get their thought system organized, and they can't get themselves organized enough to plan. Oh, okay, I have a project that's due 2 weeks from now. So when do I start working on that project? This is not a kid that's going to think, oh, I can start working on it now and do a little bit every day until the project is done. No, this is a kid that's going to wait until the day before the project is due. So how do we help this kid? If you have projects like that as teachers, it's important to let parents know, because then if I know about that as a parent, I'm going to be cueing my son or my daughter at home and saying, all right, I know you have this, project that's due, 2 weeks from now. How about you work on this piece and then show me what you came up with, and and so the parent can start cueing that at home, and then you can reinforce that at school. Okay, let's see where we are with our project. Show me, get out what you have started already, so I can see if you're on the right direction or not. So it is really critical to understand this. You're setting this kid up to fail if you have, long projects that are really, really, unscheduled on a day-to-day basis for them to do. Do you need to prepare them for that? Absolutely. Then as you've worked with them, they will start doing that. And you can have them, okay, get out your calendar, get out your schedule. So what do you do at home when you come back from school? I used to go to banks and get these, their calendars that are free, and every kid in my class had one. And for kids at the elementary level, it was like big deal. I have a calendar. What are you doing at 4 o'clock after school? And they would whip up their little calendar and look. Oh, I have this. I'm gonna be fixing, cleaning my room, and then I'm free for an hour after that. You can work with them on that at school. You know, 5 minutes before school lets out, okay, get out your calendars. Let's plan. Let's see what your afternoon is going to look like. And then you can have room within that schedule for them to start working on their 2-week project. So every day they spend a little time, every day they spend a little time on that. So you're foreshadowing what you expect from them, and that can be very helpful to them. Okay, and that helps them really kind of take control without feeling overwhelmed, and that makes a big difference. And yeah, and that kind of leads to slide 21, which is the restlessness and the kids that are really that really have the hyperactivity. Some of them don't have it, some of them do. And how it plays out is really different. So what do you deal with that? At home, it's easier to deal with that than it is at school, because at home, you can get the kid moving and doing and engaging in activities with you. When my son was home, I would work with them, and I happened to be home that afternoon or evening with, I'm home from work early enough for him to be able to do work. Guess what? We're cooking together. Come help me cook. And I'm going to show you how to cook so that when I am not at home, you can cook for yourself. In 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, this boy had learned to cook. So guess what? We're playing music and we're moving, we're dancing as we do different things. We're cutting, spinach, or we're cutting this, you're cutting that, to music, and you're working together. So you're getting the kid focused and attending and engaged, while at the same time you're not controlling, you're allowing the body to get that movement that it needs, and you're therefore combating restlessness and things like those. In class, how do you do that? In class, you start with the activities. On slide 21, there are some breathing body video clips, the stress reducing, restlessness reducing kind of movement activities. Some of them are 2 minutes, some of them are 5 minutes. Can you spare 5 minutes in a 30-minute presentation? Absolutely. You're better off spending those 5 minutes engaging in that focusing and stress relieving activity, rather than then having to put out the fire later on when the kid is all over the place and not engaging and off task, where you have to spend time then addressing that and taking away from instructional time. Okay, so, and you can figure out what you do. And at the middle school and high school level, I would have the kids be responsible for selecting that. And a lot of these activities are different at the high school level, but at the middle school and elementary level, they are perfect. Okay, the next one is, one that's really difficult at times because we don't always recognize it. Some kids especially kids with the ring of fire subtype ADHD, these are the kids that that are driven by strong emotion, and they need that to get themselves activated and get and going. So these are the kids that are really good at upsetting you. They will do something that's going to make you want to scream at them. And if you do, then it's like, oh, thank you. I needed that to get going. So you actually become participant in their, acting out or struggle. So understand who your learner is. Is this a learner that really always, gets you upset, and you get upset visibly and they can see that you are? So if they're able to elicit that kind of behavior from you as an adult, you're dealing with the ring of fire kid. Their unconscious need for stimulation is what's going on there. So what's your role as a parent or as a teacher? You don't become, their stimulus. So even when they're trying hard, you don't. But instead, you engage in a behavior that will allow them to focus and get started without the need for that, energy, in other words, from external energy. So, and these are the kids that really respond well to music, to energizing music. So you get that music going before you start your lesson, and then you start your lesson by doing something, physical first. All right, class, how about we do one spin around this, create something. There are tons of those kinds of activities in the links that I gave you, but engage in something physical. This kid needs to move before they can engage. So that's what you would be doing for them. So movement activities will work. 2-minute movement. And even if it's jumping jacks or whatever, what you're doing is literally helping to activate this kid's brain, which they need before they can get started. If you don't do that, they're going to engage in a behavior that's going to cause you to do that, or they can engage in a behavior with a peer who's going to get upset with them and get them going. And then you're spending time now talking to the peer and the student, and the instructional time goes away. So that's the ring of fire kid. And there's some things you can do for that as well. And, then you have the self-stimulation and the worrying or the kids that focus on problems. Reduce worrying. Do not counter-aggress. Stay calm. There is an approach that is called ant therapy. Daniel Amen came up with this, and what he says is, we can get ourselves really, worrying and probably focusing on problems because our thoughts tell us to. And what you do in this approach is that you teach kids how to recognize thoughts that are problematic for them. And he has 9 different thought patterns that you may identify, and then teach the kids how to interact with them. For example, when we worry, if the kid's going to have a test and they get into such a frenzy that they can't even focus to do, to start the work and so forth. In their brain is telling them something. And so what's that self-talk that's going on in their brain? You can help them writing down, what's your brain telling you right now? That I'm going to fail, that I don't know I don't know this material, even if they know it. But their brain's going to tell them, you don't know this, you're not going to be able to do this. So what do you do as a teacher and a parent? That's where you can cue if you've taught them how to stop negative thoughts. So, okay, and you can say, replace that thought in your brain. If your brain is telling you you're not ready for this test, you're not prepared, Okay, guess what? Argue with your brain. Tell your brain, no, I know this material. You can't tell me that I don't. So teach kids to have replacement self-talk that replaces those negative thoughts. And the unfortunate thing is we have them as adults as well. And if we believe every thought that comes into our brains, we will have problems. And many of us don't realize that our brains do lie to us. They do give us thoughts that are not good for us, that are not productive for us. So part of what you do there is then you use the cognitive strategies where you teach the kids how to replace that thought or how to reframe that thought. It's sort of like, if you're given, lemons, you can make lemonade. In their brains, the brain says you cannot do this, and you tell your brain, yeah, I can do this, at least I can try. And then give them some practices overtly that can help them with that. And that's another, that's a life skill. Actually, it's not just for school, because we engage in those problems as adults as well, where we tell ourselves we're not capable with this, with that. Then we can we're able to replace those thoughts as adults. With that, and for kids that don't have executive function problems, they do that for themselves. But a kid with ADHD, because of these executive functions problems, they don't tell themselves those messages. So you're going to cue them to tell themselves those messages. And if this is a kid that struggles really hard with that, have them put it on paper so they can see it. We do that as adults as well. We put messages on refrigerators, on our mirrors, to remind ourselves of things that we want to do. Have something on their desk that will remind them, this, I am capable, I am able. And you could do a group, affirmation. This is a kid that needs that affirmation to get going. So you can start your class with those affirmations that they can engage in. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. The other slides are easier to deal with, because then that's dealing with organizing space, their rooms, their desks, their bags. Those things are easier. A lot of teachers do a good job of that anyway, teaching them to organize using color-coded closets, color-coded binders and things like those. And today, with the technology that we have, there's a lot of technology that you can integrate into the classroom and help the kids. This is a kid that needs that technology, so they can have a smartwatch that's going to cue, and then have them have their schedules that and have that ready, or their iPad, and then you can load the reminders in their schedule or on their watches and things like that, so that they get cues, of timelines or deadlines or things that they need to do. And then your speech as well in class, goes along with that. So those are the ones. The rest of the slides really help you with those kinds of things, how to cue, kids so that they can get started, because they don't do a good job of that themselves. So you do that. Some teachers use music, and they help kids really. When the music volume goes up, that means it's time for you to wrap up whatever you were doing, and then then we're transitioning to another activity. Let the kids also tell you what they can do, what can be a class practice to engage in, to help them, learn to anticipate what's coming next, and so forth. Okay, I know we have 2 minutes. Questions?
One question was having to do with planning for the future. In other words, the foresight that you had talked about before. Do you have any simple suggestions about how to help a child that has attention deficit plan for future activities?
Yes. Um, if this kid is not a kid with technology like an iPad or a a smartwatch or something like that, then you can create lists. As I like calendars that you can make with the kid, so that, and literally, don't write it in for them. Have them write it in. Monday, such and such a time. This is what I'm going to be doing. At 4 o'clock after school, I'll be working on the social studies project for 15 minutes. Have them schedule those things, but also schedule playtime. Because if you don't allow them to be a kid and play, they're not going to do that work. And the reinforcement, how are you going to support them and help them feel reinforced about the work that they do? So if they start doing that at home, or give time in class, 5 minutes at the end of every period, give students 5 minutes to work on something, especially for kids that really don't have time after school to do things because of family obligations or situations at home. Then give the time at school. In high school, they have study hall. Help them use study hall for their planning and studying on their projects, but supervise the time, plan with them, and yeah, so that the plans are realistic and they can focus on those.
Okay, thank you. Namsa, as we are just 1 minute over our time right now, is there some sort of closing thought that you have for the people listening today, and maybe also any contact information for you that if they have additional questions, they could maybe talk to you about?
Absolutely. If you don't mind, Bunny, you can give them my email and my phone number.
Okay, we'll do that. So let me just tell everybody at this time, if you would like to have more information about how to contact us, please shoot me an email and I will be glad to provide that information for you. So Namsa, thank you so very much for your presentation today. I think that I know for a fact that I learned a lot, and I'm sure that those that participated did the same. So we greatly appreciate that. This will conclude our webinar, and we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Please be reminded that over 80 scheduled trainings and webinars are available for 2019, and please feel free to check the Wisconsin Facets website calendar and register for any of those upcoming trainings that you may be interested in. Also, please watch for the short evaluation that will be coming your way after the conclusion of our webinar today. I'd like to thank NUMSA again, and thank you all for participating with us today.
Bunny, can I say one last thing?
Sure, please.
I just want to leave you with one thought. There are a lot of things I would love to share with you, but I just want to leave you with one thing. Human beings, especially children, cannot learn from people they despise. So as teachers, make sure you're creating a climate of respect and compassion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all, and we appreciate you participating with us today.